Welcome to Hustle and Pro, talking sports from youth to pro. We're here at Visual Learning Solutions in Frisco, Texas, and I'm your host, Kelly Walker. This is a big episode I'm very excited about. We're celebrating our 3rd birthday, and to do that, we have a guest that I have been looking forward to since the very beginning of Hustle and Pro, a voice that we all know and love, Mark Followill. Welcome to Hustle and Pro, Mark.
I'm honored to be here for the birthday celebration.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, we need some cake.
Yeah, it's a big one. And so, okay, I have to get this out of the way because I'm a P1, a ticket P1.
Okay.
And so I have to ask you about your time there. First of all, well, for those who don't know what the ticket is, if you're not in the Dallas area, it's our sports radio station.
Right.
So was your time there as fun as it sounds like it would be?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience. I mean, more than anything, from the fun perspective, this is how I would characterize it. Because really, in the early days of the station, it was extraordinary fun. Because if you recall, when the station came on the air, it came on with a lot of fanfare and a lot of speculation about, well, who are a lot of these guys?
Mm-hmm.
Can an all-sports radio station make it in Dallas? Because really only people care about the Cowboys. And so, and there
Right.
weren't name personalities that people, everywhere knew about. And of course, no, those guys are all big names and huge names, as a matter of fact, and have, been a huge part of the success of the station. But early on, you may have heard personalities on the station use the term bunker mentality before, and it really was that. And so it was a group of people that had this sort of us against the world mentality, and it also just created just going out and having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So there were get-togethers and happy hours and parties and things like that were just, it was so, there was such bonding.
Yeah,
that
and that's
went
what
on.
it sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah,
And it's
it
still
was.
carried through all these years later. So when you're going through that and
Right.
you're making these bonding with these people like Mike Reiner, like,
Right.
do you sense the magnitude of what you're getting yourself into, or was this just this starter idea and you didn't know where it was going to go?
Starter idea and didn't
Yeah.
know where it was going to go.
Okay.
And I think Mike, that would be a great question to ask Mike, because he would have some very, very insightful answers about it, because I've heard him talk about doing some of our very early remotes and days of the ticket,
Yeah.
and him realizing, wow, there are people like really invested in this station and who we are and our personalities. And so I think, you get an idea of that, but what I really cherish is not just the fun, but I learned a lot. And I think I learned a lot that's really helped me from a play-by-play and from an announcer standpoint as the years have gone on. Not just the technique and technical aspects of play-by-play, but the importance of that people need to be invested in who you are as a person, and your personality coming through
Right.
is what is, over time, of course, people want to turn on a Maverick game and hear it called appropriately. But I
Right.
think there's also just a lot to be said, especially whenever you do the long season sports like baseball, basketball, hockey, where you're being invited into somebody's home for a long period of time, for many, many nights over the course of the
Yeah,
year.
they want to like
Yeah,
you.
They want to like you. Exactly. I just had this conversation with somebody
Yeah,
today
they
about
wanna think
likability
they
and
know you.
personality. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're part of the family, kind of.
Right.
And so I think that's what I really learned from my time at the ticket, is that personality and people getting to know you and invest in who you are as a person will only enhance the fact that they tune in first and foremost to watch the Mavericks or
Right.
FC Dallas. That's what people are tuning in first and foremost for, of course. But if people develop chemistry and a bond and a relationship and association with
yeah.
you, then that's
come
all
back.
the better. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all the better.
Okay, so fast forward to now, like you mentioned, you're on the air covering games for our favorite team. So play-by-play for the Dallas Mavs
Right.
for 15 plus-ish years.
So this would be we're in the midst of my 23rd season right now.
Whoa, 23.
23rd,
Oh,
yeah,
my
yeah.
years are way off then. Okay,
Yeah, so
23.
the chronological order of that is, for 2 years I worked on the radio broadcast, mostly as the studio host.
Okay.
But I did fill in doing play-by-play for selected games whenever there were absences due to illnesses and conflicts and things like that.
So you were the backup for a while.
Yes.
Until you were the
Yes,
A-team.
and then moved into the radio play-by-play role full-time in 2001. So there were 2 seasons of fill-in radio, 4 seasons of full-time radio play-by-play, and then now 17 seasons. This is my 17th year on the TV broadcast.
on the TV side.
Yeah,
Maybe
Fox
that's
Sports Southwest, now Valley
where I
Sports
was looking.
Southwest. Yeah.
Okay, Fox Sports Southwest, now Valley Sport. Okay.
Yep.
And then on the flip side, you mentioned, and your shirt shows.
Yes.
So with FC Dallas, is 10 years in the right ballpark, or was there a lot more behind that I don't know about?
I just finished my 10th season.
Okay,
So this
10th
upcoming
season.
season will be number 11. Yep.
Okay, and
Yep,
there's
so
other
right
stuff.
on.
So you've done so many other things, and we're going to talk a lot about the soccer things, but some things like SMU football before that?
Yeah, I did 2 years of SMU football radio
Okay.
play-by-play. Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
1999 and 2000, those seasons, and that's kind of like right when I was transitioning into doing a lot more Maverick games, and so those
Okay.
all kind of like the start of one sort of accelerated the end
Sure.
of another.
Yeah.
And and stepped away from SMU
You
at that point.
keep rolling on your calendar.
Yeah.
Okay, so all that being said, so you're a very familiar voice in our living room, and so like for me, voices like Pat Summerall and Eric Nadel and Brad Sham, Tom Grieve, those are like me listening as a kid, the voices that I grew up with. So I want to know who yours are. Like, who are your influences in this world?
Well, I loved listening to Brad growing up. I've always, had immense respect for Brad Sham, and he's been nothing but great to me over the years. So Brad's right at the top of the list.
Okay.
But I would say, if I were to identify from a play-by-play perspective growing up, the most influential voice to me, it would be the late Mark Holtz, who was the lead play-by-play announcer on the Rangers radio broadcast from the late 70s. And I don't remember the exact year he started, but I remember that he was the guy when I started like being cognizant and aware of listening to the
Hearing it.
Rangers on the radio and who I was listening to.
So late 70s, you say?
Yeah, he started then. Yeah.
When did he end that? then?
He ended his radio broadcast time with the Rangers, I believe, in 1994.
Okay.
And then for a couple of years, he was the Rangers television play-by-play voice. And then he was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia, left the broadcast booth, and regrettably passed away just a few months after that. But
Okay.
what I really, really loved about Mark is that I would listen to these Ranger games when I was growing up. And I mean, you know this, Kelly, the Rangers were really bad during a lot of those years, but yet he made the games so exciting. There was an enthusiasm, there was an excitement in his voice. And it really was kind of the basis for my whole sort of focus of sports broadcasting. Rule number one, I have to kind of like say this the most polite way that I can say it. I would say it a little bit differently if we weren't doing this.
Yeah.
But if I don't sound like I care about the game that I'm doing, then how in the world could I expect the guy at home on the couch to care about the game?
It's so true.
Yeah.
You got to bring a level,
Yeah.
even if the game's not going to bring it that
Right.
night.
Yeah,
Like,
for
you
sure.
got to bring it to make the people believe, like, why should I stay on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always thought that Mark was very, very good at that. And that's really the thing in listening to him.
Okay.
Beyond just his outstanding description as a radio play-by-play person
Yeah,
and
the
realizing
technical
how
pieces.
realizing how important that is. But just,
I
that's it to
asked
me.
about the timing with him just because I wasn't as familiar with that name, but so that aligns though. So I bet I know the voice.
Right.
When I was growing up, so most of like the 80s into the early 90s, I'm from a few hours away from this area.
Right.
So we were Rangers fans, and that
Right.
was my main thing.
Mhm.
I was a softball player, and my dad was our coach. So we were baseball people.
Right.
And we would watch, but listen.
Right.
My dad
Sure.
was big on mute the TV, listen to the radio broadcast, and
Absolutely.
this and that. And so I probably know his voice, just didn't, know the name as much. So.
Throughout the 80s, the broadcast was split between Mark and Eric Nadel, the
Mhm.
Baseball Hall of Famer,
Right.
enshrined in Cooperstown and
Right.
still is part of the broadcast. And in the 80s, Mark would do the first, second, and third. Eric would do the fourth, fifth, and sixth. Then Mark would be the analyst, and then Mark would go back to play-by-play for the seventh, eighth, and ninth innings, and then Eric would be the analyst for
That
the seventh,
seems
eighth, and ninth.
complicated.
Yeah, but they were so good at it.
Is that normal to break up a?
Yeah, for a baseball
okay.
broadcast,
Okay.
sure. For
I
a
didn't know
baseball radio broadcast, that is not unique. And
Okay.
so, the thing about it is that the end of game moments, like Nolan Ryan no hitters,
Yeah.
Mark got to call those and was amazing at those. But if you talk to Eric, doing the middle innings meant that Eric was in position to do Nolan Ryan's 5,000th strikeout of Ricky Henderson in the fifth game of that particular August day back in 1989. So
I've never thought about that. Like prepping for that game,
yeah,
you have to know if you're in your team, right? Like not the team on the field, but like your broadcast team,
Yeah.
what milestone you could hit that game
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
be prepared for it. And not only that, know who's going to cover it.
right.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and obviously, I'm talking a lot about Mark, but Eric is somebody who was an instrumental part of those broadcasts. And I loved Eric's role in those broadcasts as well. And so he was a very, very influential voice. And what I loved about what Eric does is he has such knowledge and curiosity about the history of the game and the off the wall moments in the game and the story behind the story, if you will, the rest of the story, if I may quote Paul Harvey from the old days. Eric was just
Another voice we
yeah,
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was so good at that. And also that's something I learned from Eric too. And, I think I have that sort of natural curiosity about off the beaten path stories, if you will, in the game. And so I don't always get to do it the way that he does, but try to bring that sometimes every once in a while in
Well,
basketball.
those are the things you can remember.
Right.
Like, especially with baseball, if I'm watching that, or even with basketball, any sport, that you remember. And like, as a parent now, I pass those things down.
Sure.
The little nuggets, like the little random nuances about the sport. Like, did you know, or did you know this acronym, or, whatever, this stat, and as graphics go up. And so that's something I love to watch like during the broadcast. Okay, so you mentioned those names. Was play-by-play like your ultimate goal always, or is this something that it's evolved kind of accidentally, or were you always set on being play-by-play guy?
I wouldn't say always set on it, but it was certainly something that was high on my list. I was very interested growing up in being involved in sports, whether it was a sports news person or a radio play-by-play person. My dad worked some in radio, not when I was alive, when he was much, much younger. And so that sort of romanticized the idea of being on radio. So that was probably like my real first love, is some sort of melding of the world of sports and how I loved to look at my baseball cards when I was a kid, and radio, because the other really nerdy thing that I did, and I love to tell this story, is that when I was young, I was fascinated by the idea that, when it comes to AM radio at night, through something called skywave propagation, the signal skips around. And so you can be in Dallas, Texas, and you can hear, and you can still do this now, by the way, WLW News Radio 700 in Cincinnati, and WBBM in Chicago is 780 on the dial, and KOA in Denver 850, and WWL in New Orleans 870.
You can hear those?
Yeah, you can hear all these stations around the country at night, and you can hear that not just in Dallas. I mean, you can hear that those are clear channel AM stations that WBAP used to. I don't listen to them much these days, but I know that they used to talk about the fact that they could be heard in 38 states. So a clear channel 50,000 watt AM station has the ability at night to reach, vast regions of the country. And so sitting alone in my room as a 12 or 13-year-old, I was fascinated by this and thought, wow, what a cool job it would be to be the guy that's on the radio, and somebody like me is listening to you, when you're on the radio in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they're sitting somewhere, some random place, half a nation away. So I was always really intrigued by that. And that was one of the first things that sort of pulled me into the love of the idea of radio and being, quote unquote, on the air.
Yeah. And you said your dad was in the business too. So you grew up seeing it.
Sure.
Or hearing it, seeing
hearing
it,
stories about it. Yeah. He wasn't doing that when I was alive. It was more something that mixed in with his being in the Navy stories and things like that. Were stories that, I loved to sit out on the front porch at night, during the summertime and hear stories and him spin yarns and tell stories about. So it was neat.
So we're going to shift to soccer in a second.
Okay.
But before that, I didn't even ask you, were you an athlete growing up?
Well, I wanted to be and tried to be.
Okay.
But I mean, can you be an athlete and be a terrible athlete?
Yeah.
I suppose that's
I didn't say
possible.
were you a good athlete. Well, I mean, because, I asked if you always wanted to be a play-by-play or broadcaster or radio. But I guess before that, I wonder, like, obviously you're interested in sports.
Right.
So was that because you played sports young, and then you wanted to cover sports on the radio, or were you just always a fan?
I was more a fan. I tried to play, do the best I could. That wasn't very good. And probably for a lot of reasons that aren't worth getting into here, just, I didn't probably have the drive and the desire and the energy to do the things on the field that would make you the best that you could be. But I love to watch it, and I love to be around it, and I love to study numbers and stats about it and things like that. But to do what I had to do to be the best competitor that I could be, I hadn't sort of found that in my DNA yet. The one thing I found it in, the one thing I would say that athletically I've sort of kind of gotten into as the years have gone by is I'm a big runner. And so I'm good at, so at least I've learned at the age of 30 and on into being 50 years old, that when it comes to running for a while, for a long distance in a straight line, I'm okay at that.
You can do it.
Yeah, that's one thing in my athletic achievements that I really focused and trained hard on as an adult.
Which is funny.
I got competitive about it.
Because as a kid, that isn't interesting at all. That's the last thing as kids that we want to do. Let's run a while in a straight line. We want to play and be in the game. But then as we get older, we okay, we can do that. That is a simplified version of something I can do.
I do wish that's the one thing, kind of looking back, just because realizing that my body style and my cardiovascular system sort of had an aptitude for it. If I could go back in time and had tried out for the high school cross country team, for example, and maybe devoted some energy to it, that would have been something that maybe if I look back on it, I could have excelled at. But at least as an adult, that's been the one competitive sports thing that I
Hmm.
really embraced, especially a few years ago. Not as fast as I used to be, and don't train as hard as I used to. But for a while, I was like really obsessive about time and running
Hmm.
and training to do like 5Ks and things like that,
Right.
and really dialed in on that for a while as an adult. But as a kid, my sports endeavors were much more about the concept of watching it and studying about it than it was the actual performance of it. I
Okay.
was a fish out of water when it came to trying to perform at sports.
So that's the natural progression as
Yeah.
to why you now call the games. That is,
Right.
it makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay, well, we are going to talk more about specifically soccer and your job in that sport, but we're going to take a quick break, hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back with more from Mark Followill. This episode is brought to you by The Pit, Performance Indoor Training. The Pit has 3 training and entertainment complexes in the DFW area that offer both indoor and outdoor elite soccer training. The Pit offers league play for co-ed, youth, and adult leagues. And for training, the Junior Academy is for ages 2 through 6, plus the Pit Soccer Academy for ages 5+. And goalkeeper training is offered as well. To learn more about the Pit Frisco, Plano, or Roanoke, head to performanceindoortraining.com. For one-on-one tutoring for every student, all ages, and all subjects, call Tutor Doctor. They even make house calls. They provide in-home or online learning for all types and all goals. And don't forget Tutor Doctor for SAT and ACT test prep. So call for your free consultation today, 972-703-9344, or go to tutordoctor.com/Frisco. Tutor Doctor, how learning hits home. Welcome back to Hustle and Pro. We're here with Mark Followill. We're going to talk about his soccer coverage. So your coverage of soccer sort of seemed to boom when we hear you doing games for Copa America, CONCACAF Gold Cup,
Yeah.
UEFA Europa, Bundesliga, 2016 Summer Olympics, and 2018 World Cup.
Right.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of soccer. So why all the soccer?
Well, I love the game. And I was very, very fortunate to get involved with FC Dallas and be involved at a time that because the Mavericks were on Fox Sports Southwest, because that had sort of led to a relationship with Fox where I was doing some college football games for Fox, because I did a lot of Big 12 and Conference USA games for Fox for several years. So I had a relationship there. I knew what sort of the focus of Fox was in terms of their soccer coverage, which is we need to cultivate more American voices covering the sport. They tried the thing with Gus Johnson that had, I think, mixed results. A lot of people, didn't like it at all. I think, Gus did, under the circumstances, the best that he could do. I think he's a wonderful play-by-play announcer. And I think he certainly had some moments where his enthusiasm was great and loved it. But, it didn't work out. He moved away from it. They, whatever the decisions were made there. But I knew they still wanted to continue to cultivate American voices. So it really was just one of these things where I reached out and said, hey, I do MLS games in Dallas. I love the game. I'm watching a lot of what's going on around the world, so I have familiarity with it. I would love to work my way into the mix. And it started with some things in 2014. I did a Women's World Cup qualifier for CONCACAF in 2014 between Jamaica and Martinique. It wasn't the greatest game in the world, but it was my first opportunity to do something for them, and everything just sort of grew from there. And I was very, very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time and knock on the right doors. And I knocked long enough and loudly enough that they let me in.
Okay, so with that international soccer experience, I heard, probably on the ticket, that you learned Spanish for that reason. Is that true?
That is a big part of it, yes.
Okay.
So I've always, growing up in Texas and being someone who takes a lot of vacations to Mexico because it's a close place to go, it's a beautiful country with beautiful people and just it's a tremendous place, and I love it. And we could go on and on about that, and I won't, go wading off into those waters too much, but I really, really enjoy, my wife and I enjoy our time there. So it's always been something I've wanted to do and be more than just the guy who took it in high school, who still had like the capability of like broken Spanish, who could sort of like be very like base level passable on a vacation in Mexico.
Right.
And then I did it from a soccer perspective because I would read stories. I would be doing a CONCACAF game between El Salvador and Guatemala in the Gold Cup, and want to be able to read stories from their local press and be able to understand a little bit more about what was going on these teams, because there's just not a whole lot of information out there in English language coverage about these teams.
Right.
So that was a big part of it. Another thing that I really wanted to get to the point of doing is to be able to talk to guys with FC Dallas, because I felt like I was missing an opportunity to talk to guys, to get to know them, and to be able to share a little bit more about them with our viewers. And so, thanks
Yeah.
to Dallas County Community College and also the University of North Texas, because I did take some advanced level classes there. I put in a lot of time in it. My reading and writing got a lot better. My ability to say things got marginally better. My ability to understand got a little bit less than marginally better. So it was very, very useful. I have not been able to apply it in all the ways I hope,
Yeah.
particularly like talking to players and things like that. But it's been immensely helpful in terms of vacation trips and things like that. And it's been immensely helpful in terms of being able to read things online, read
Mhm.
things on social media about teams. So when
Prepare.
you're
Yeah.
covering Honduras and Guatemala, like I said in the Gold Cup, or you're covering Chile in a World Cup game,
Right.
or Argentina in a World Cup game. And I guess I'd never had Argentina, but I had Argentina in the Copa America, and I had Chile in the Copa America Centenario, and I've had games involving Mexico in the Gold Cup, and games involving Mexico in the Olympics this past summer. So, I can read a newspaper article in a Spanish language newspaper and understand
Get it.
enough of it
Yeah.
and get it. And sometimes I can directly translate quotes if they're pretty easy. There's still some things that are said in a way that they don't
Sure.
teach you in a
Sure.
book. Yeah.
Just like we speak. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
So,
in pronouncing the
yeah,
names.
yes,
Announcing and
yes,
pronouncing. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. So it's been a wonderful thing. I wish that I were able to keep up with it more. There's just not, nobody's out there practicing with me all the time. So I sense that I've lost a lot of it, but I
Yeah.
listen to music. And, look, this is the thing that it also did for me that I am eternally grateful for. And that is taking classes in Spanish launched my whole like adult engagement with education. I mean, it changed my life by doing that. Not just because, getting to learn another language and getting more immersed in another culture,
Hmm.
but also, that is really the impetus for me going back to school as a late 40s, now 50-year-old adult. I finished my degree thanks to the good folks at University of North Texas. I had my first ever advising session right up here at UNT Frisco,
Uh-huh.
and started on a degree program. I took classes and finished my degree in December of 2020. And then because of the pandemic, there were like a lot of other classes online. So I got a second bachelor's degree in history.
Just kept going.
Yeah,
In
and now
history.
I'm in
Okay.
a grad school program now at the University of Alabama studying for a master's in journalism. I
Oh
started
my
that this
gosh.
past semester.
I
And
didn't know that. I don't
yeah, I
think.
didn't really say much about it because I was like worried, what if I flunk out because the classes are hard? So it's like I don't want to tell people
Say it
that
out
I'm
loud
doing.
so that
Yeah.
you're accountable for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So yeah, that you're
It's on
exactly
the
right.
record
Yeah,
now.
it's on the record. It does
Yeah.
make me accountable for it because I thought,
That's
well,
awesome.
yeah, grad school, like, is this gonna like totally kick my butt and I'm gonna fail?
Yeah.
And so
If it
I was
does,
a little worried about it, but we made it through one semester successfully in that regard. So
that's great.
yeah,
That's a lot of
Spanish.
education to
Yeah,
reignite. Yeah,
yeah,
I can
and
see how.
it's been invigorating,
Yeah.
and it's been amazing to do it. I'm so happy that I've done it, and it's opened my eyes to a lot of other things out there. And it's just like, because I left school early. I left school early because I wanted to start working in radio.
Right.
That whole
Get
dream
on
of
it.
working in
Yeah.
radio.
Get
And
your internship and start
yeah,
working.
start
Get
doing
your
that.
foot in the door.
Yeah, so
Right.
I'm so thankful for like just this decision one day, man. I'm going to take Spanish. And the thing with Spanish too is I tried to do a tutoring service that would come to the house
Mhm.
through an organization, a great organization that works locally called Spanish House, and it was good and I enjoyed it, but I realized I need to do it in terms of a classroom format where there's a grade on the line and you learn it the way that they would teach you in school, and there's
Yeah.
this sort of like really
Curriculum.
formulated curriculum.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I know that we like gone way off the trail of what we were planning on talking about here,
No,
but this
no.
is something obviously I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah,
I've always been curious when I've heard that, and I can relate to you kind of reach a point when you're interviewing players
Yeah.
where I was telling you, I think I've had 9 or 10 or 11 FC Dallas players
Right.
on this show, and I think I hit a wall every
Right.
season where I'm like, I think the rest aren't English speaking or aren't comfortable, in a interview style
Right.
speaking English, and so I feel like I'm leaving so much out there on the table that I
Yeah.
don't have. I just don't, get to talk to those guys. And so I
That's
applaud you
yeah.
for going that extra step and getting that.
Well, that's the one thing with it. I talked to Brian Acosta one time, and he was so nice. And I mean, God bless him. He could not have been more patient and encouraging. And I was trying, and God, I was so nervous.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, they probably appreciate the effort.
of course,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah, I wouldn't even try because I'm the high school. Well, I did a little bit in college, but I don't use it, never really have enough I wouldn't even try out loud to a player.
Right.
Like, there's no way. So for you to show that effort probably goes a really long way with these players.
Yeah, well, I would like to do more of that. That's, like I said, the one thing that never really has launched in the way I wanted it to. But a lot of great came out of it, and hopefully more will moving forward. But yeah, it's a little rusty these days. I got to keep on listening to my Latin pop stations on the radio to try to stay up with a little bit of it.
Okay, next FC Dallas season, which is going to be here in a blink.
Yeah.
I'll be listening for more like long form interviews
Oh,
in
gosh.
Spanish from you to see how it's going. Okay, well, that also brings me to the next thing I want to ask you about. So when I last saw you, we were at an FC Dallas like press conference covering the new head coach when Nico gets to town, right? So that made me start wondering, when big events like that happen with the teams that you're covering, and you have to stay on top of coach hiring or firing or like big marquee players coming and going, how much does that make your job harder for when you're on the air next time? Do those things motivate you and make it more fun to do your job and get your juices flowing? Or is that something that like takes you back a step and you gotta prepare and learn to then get on the air and talk about these changes?
That's a great question. Gosh, I don't really feel like anybody's ever asked me that in that way before. And I guess my answer to that is I don't think it really changes anything. It's just a new thing to prepare for. It's all part of the business. The one constant in professional sports is change, and players are changing, and coaches are changing, and front office personnel change. And so to me, the hardest part of that, of course, is that you build relationships with people, and then all of a sudden, because of how things are in pro sports, they're sort of just like instantaneously and unceremoniously out the door. And, there's not much of a chance to say goodbye and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So that's the sad part of it. But a new person coming in doesn't really change anything other than you have to prepare to understand and learn about who they are so you can share that with the viewer. And then obviously you've got to build and cultivate a relationship with that person. And you hope that they respect what you do. And, it has always gone well in that regard, in terms of building new relationships with people.
That probably is, for me, it would be a source of a little bit of anxiety. If I have a good relationship, like with Lucci, right? We all love Lucci. And it's funny because we're going to see him back like really soon on the other side. But when a new guy comes in, and this isn't so much with players, but with the coaching staff, like you have to have a good rapport with these guys on a regular basis. And so I would wonder, like, what if I rub them the wrong way off the top? What if my first question irritates them, or like I want to get off to a good start so that we can build a good relationship.
You only get one chance to make a
right. Do you ever think about that stuff, or are you just so good at it now it doesn't bother you?
No, of course, absolutely. You think about that sort of thing. And look, what you're trying to ultimately do is you need to build a relationship of trust, because if you're going to be the best broadcaster you can be, then the coach and the front office, they've got to trust you, that you're going to do your job, that you're going to look out for the best interest of the franchise, but also they need to kind of let you in a little bit more to know what's going on. And so there's that fine line of, look, I don't want to be in too far because that's intruding too far into ground I don't need to intrude into. Right. However, I do need to be in a little bit closer because I need to have a little bit of an idea of some things that are going on, even if it's just watching practice. I mean, that's really kind of what I'm getting at, that you want a coach that trusts, that you'll go watch practice, that you'll see the things that you need to see to prepare for your game, but understand that there's obviously, you're in a trust tree and that information doesn't go outside of that trust tree.
On the air.
Yeah.
Not everything you see at practice is going on the air, and they have to believe you.
At least not until game time anyway, when that sort of thing is going to be out there for everybody to know, like who the starting lineup is or something like that.
Yeah. Right. Because if you break that trust, you're not going to get anything good. You might be restricted or whatever.
Yeah. A lot of times you don't get a second opportunity, in those situations. So that's really the most important thing.
Yeah. You mentioned like some of the sad pieces. So I'm mostly a fan, right? And so when we have players like Pepe and Reggie, and when I'm talking FC Dallas still, players that we know they're going to leave. And that is the nature of where we are in the MLS. We know they're probably going to leave, some of our favorites, as they move on. It like hurts sometimes and hits up like my family hard, because we are in the seats in the stands every game. We do everything with the team. And so like, do you have the separation where you don't feel that at all, and you just move on, and you know it's a transaction, it's work, whatever, or do you have some of the fan link where you
Oh,
feel it?
I'm probably in the middle ground of where you are, but completely distant from it, where it's just a transaction. I
Okay,
mean, these are people, and you build up relationships with people.
right.
You know, they're, you know, we're, and to your earlier point, I mean, this all came up just around the Dirk jersey retirement ceremony recently.
Yes.
You know, we're not covering games. We cover people playing games. And I do think there's a really important difference and distinction there. You know, these are not robots that are out there. These are people that we invest, just like the whole thing about investing in your personality as an announcer.
Yep.
You know, you invest in the personality and the everything that surrounds the individual that's playing these games. Dirk is Dirk because of the person that he was, not just all of the accolades and achievements and things
Right.
that he did for the Mavericks, but also because he let us in and we understood what kind of person that he was and what kind of amazing person that he was.
Right.
So that's what made the whole Dirk story that. And, you know, these guys for FC Dallas, from that perspective, they're young, they haven't had a lot of success yet, they're very well grounded. All of them seem very well raised.
Yeah.
They come here, they learn the FC Dallas way very well. They're approachable. You build bonds, you build relationships with them, especially when they're young players in their
Right.
career. They're still kind
Finishing
of
high
wide-eyed,
school.
and they're like
Yeah.
they're way closer in age to your kids than they are me.
Oh,
So
for
there's a
sure.
bond there. Yeah.
Some of
So
these players are like
yeah,
friends with my daughter on social media and
yeah.
stuff, and it's bizarre.
So it
And they
so
just want to play soccer.
yeah,
You know.
the perspective that you're coming from, I 100% understand it. And that's really, I mean, to be honest, that's what, again, sports is all about. It's about people and relationships, and life for that matter is about people and relationships. I mean, I always bring all these stats and numbers into the stuff that I do, and that's fine. It's got its place. But, you know, life and sports, and it's about people and, you know,
Yep.
and what, and how watching these games and these people make you feel, and you know the return to that relationship, because you know I do think that you are, if you're a player, I don't have this experience in it, but I've watched it for a long time, you're energized by that relationship with people, and by that thrill that you get
Mhm.
from performing for people, and the you know
The
the connection that you get.
energy
Yeah,
and yeah.
and you connect with people. I heard Jason Terry say one time when he went and spoke at an event, and you know there was a lot of like noise and kids talking,
Mhm.
and I was just like, I was watching this thing, it's like, you know, the crowd control of this is not very good, and it's frustrating because it's Jason Terry
Right.
up there
Like
talking.
listen, focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I talked to him afterwards about it, and he said, if you change one kid's life today, then it's all worth it. And so I do believe that these guys, you know, I've heard that from a lot of other people. You know, they cherish these relationships because you can
I believe
impact
that.
people's lives. For
I
sure.
believe it. And I think
Yeah.
that's why we are so drawn to sports.
Yeah.
It's not the game, it's the players playing the game. It's the
Yeah.
game, how the game is played by the people and the
Yeah.
connections that we make.
We're not covering games, we're covering people playing
People
games.
I
There you
love
go.
that
Yeah.
quote.
Thanks.
Okay, so all right, you had 23 years covering the Mavs, right? We talked about that, and you mentioned the Dirk jersey. I was going to ask you, it's almost like you read my mind, because I was going to ask you, just recently, we see the Dirk jersey retirement evening, and it brought up like so many memories. Just me as a fan sitting on
Sure,
my
of
couch.
course.
My husband was there.
Right.
I didn't get the invite from
We can talk to you about that.
the buddies, but that's fine watching it from my couch. But it brought up so many just cool the visuals, right, on the video, and then seeing some of the people talking on the video, and then the championship team players that came back, and
Yes.
just seeing them, and I love seeing them older and all that stuff. So I'm curious that in addition to Dirk, because I think that's an obvious like
Sure.
top guy that you've gotten to cover. Who else stands out, whether it's a player, a coach, a season? Like, what are some of your favorites?
Oh, wow. Well, I think from the Mavs perspective, like one favorite game that will always stand out to me. I mean, I know it's Dirk again, but it's the 30K game. You know, when he achieved the 30,000 point milestone and needed 20 points going into the game, and they were handing out the T-shirts beforehand, and I know that he didn't like that because
That's a lot.
yeah, he hadn't been playing well, and so there was pressure on him. But there was just such an electricity in the crowd that night, and then he came out, bang, 3 in the first minute, bang, another 3 in the first minute, and it's like, okay, I'm
Great,
getting
yeah.
it done tonight.
Yeah.
This is going down. Get your friends to the TV, everybody. I'm going to put the show on for you tonight. We're going to
Yeah,
get this
I
over
love
with.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that the electricity of that and getting to call that, because look, it's only happened 7 times. There are only 7 players in NBA history that have reached 30,000 points, and that it
amazing.
happened. Yeah, it happened at home. It happened in front of a full house. Who just was. I was shocked, to be honest with you, that night, like how into it the crowd was. I mean, I knew they would be into it, but there was just
Like
this level
zoned
of
in.
energy. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yeah. And so
Yeah.
I
That's
will never
great.
forget that game. I mean, there's so many others, and I mean, look, I could go on and on about memories and stories and people and things like that. But I mean, that's the one game, if I like were to look back and say that's the thing that I'll remember and how it all felt and what it was all like. I mean, I'll remember that forever.
That's great.
And like the championship season was great,
Sure.
and
I mean, yeah.
yeah, of course, the games were great. But the thing that everybody has to remember is local television only covers the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, you don't get to go all the way.
Now, I
Right.
will say that Game 6 in Portland in that year's playoff series, after we had blown it in Game 4 and blew a 23-point lead, and the series was 2-2, and everybody thought we were gonna these guys are gonna screw it up again,
Yeah.
And the Mavericks came back at home and won Game 5, and then had a 17-point lead in Game 6. And the darn thing got down to being a 1-point game in the fourth quarter. I mean, and Gerald Wallace had a steal and a dunk. And I'm watching people around me, and they're just going absolutely bananas.
Yeah.
I mean, people are jumping up and down on the front row in a way. It's like, what is
Yeah,
happening right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was I will remember that one for a long time. That's the thing from the championship season, the one game from the championship season that I was involved in that I'll remember. And then the other
That's
games,
great.
like the Lakers and the Thunder and Miami, as that series went along, I mean, I wasn't doing those games, so I watched those like an entirely different perspective
Sure.
than I did from a broadcaster. The Mavericks won those first 2 games in the Lakers series, and I remember Game 3 was also so close. People think of Game 4 against the Lakers and the blowout on Mother's Day, where we just made 23s or whatever in that game, and it was done by halftime. But in the final minutes of that Game 3, I mean, it was like a 1-possession game, and I'm sitting next to Skin at that point, and I'm just sitting there like the whole time. It's like, Page is getting switched on to Lamar Odom. It's like, somebody's got to help him. Somebody's got to help him. Come on now. It's like, I'm sitting there coaching every game of like I'm Carlisle,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting in the
Yeah.
200 section coaching the game. So
Can't help it.
yeah, there are really neat memories. And then of course, like by the time the series was over with, it was to the point that I was like, I can't even watch the game right now. I just have to listen to the crowd
Yeah.
reaction. So
Yeah.
the
The ups and downs, right? Just
Yeah, for
how
sure.
you experience it.
Yeah.
I love it. Those are some great memories. And just hearing you talk about it is exciting.
Yeah.
Because you remember, obviously you remember the details. And so it's great hearing you recall it.
Yeah, it was a fun run, and obviously, that's a memory that I'll cherish, forever. And gosh, the parade after that, for some dumb reason, they let me ride on a float in the parade.
That's great. You earned it. You're a part of the
I
team.
didn't do anything.
Sure.
So yeah, all I remember about that is I was constantly on the parade float. I just got it was an out of body experience almost. I
bet.
remember I kept on doing the Hulk Hogan. You know how Hulk Hogan will go up to fans and he'll do
yeah.
like this. I want I'm doing that business
Oh,
the whole
that's
time.
hilarious.
just acting a fool pretty much.
That's what it's all about, though. You don't get to win championships very often. And
Yeah.
so, if your team, the team that you've ride or die with all year,
Yeah.
it is your work, but it is also obviously a passion and a love for you. So when they get that moment,
Yeah.
you get to be a part of it.
I think
Hey,
that's the
soak it
only
all
cigar
up.
that I've ever smoked in my life, as a matter of fact. So yeah, that was
That's funny.
that was the victory cigar that
That's
day
great.
the parade of all
That's
things.
great. I love all those memories. Well, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
it's a lot of fun.
sitting down with us. I know
Yeah.
that you are. I mean, you're in the thick of Mavs right now, and probably prepping for soccer and all the other things happening. So I really appreciate the time that you
Yeah.
took to sit down with
Yeah,
us
well, of course, happy to do it.
and go through this stuff with us. So
Yeah, no, it's
appreciate
great.
it.
I loved getting, and I'm sorry, I talked about something that wasn't kind of probably our plan, but
No.
my UNT experience, and since we're at UNT
Yeah,
Frisco
in
here
the
at,
building.
at the VLS, it's a very, very meaningful thing to me in life. So that was
Yeah.
great to get to kind of revisit and share the greatness of education. 'Cause,
Absolutely.
being a lifelong learner, if there's anything anybody took away from this, it's fun to tell Maverick stories and it's fun to tell FC Dallas and soccer stories.
Yeah.
But lifelong learning is something that we all should aspire to. And I'm so grateful that UNT, the folks here in UNT Frisco and in Denton, have all been such an instrumental part of that re-engagement. It's changed my life, and so I'm eternally grateful for that. With the things that it's opened my eyes to later in life.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. No, I'm
Thank
glad
you.
you shared it.
Appreciate
yeah,
that.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Hustle and Pro. Find us on your favorite podcast platform or watch us on YouTube. However you find us, please like and comment and share, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode of Hustle and Pro. See you next time.